Hi everybody and welcome to a new episode of Plaguenarr. And as usually we're gonna start with priming the mini black, then we're using a 1:4 mix of Kantor Blue and Water, so 1 part Kantor Blue and 4 parts water, and stipple on a soft base coat all over the mini. With this guide, I wanted to try something completely new on my channel and narrowed down a Eavy Metal color scheme to its basics to provide you the ability to even paint your speed painting minis in a Eavy Metal style. To apply this base coat, I'm using an Artis Opus Series D size M brush. Next, we're using a 1:4 mix of Caledor Sky and Water. So again, 1 part Caledor Sky, 4 parts water. And in this case, we're trying to focusing on the parts where light would most hit the mini. So if you can't imagine where light would most hit the mini, simply take your primed mini under a lamp, take a photo, and use this as a reference for the light source. And this time this will be a little bit inconvenient because this is basically the last layer we will apply with volumetric highlights. Normally I would do 3 to 4 layers, but the Eavy Metal style is primarily achieved by edge highlighting, and this is where we will spend most of the time, and we need to spare some time into the base layers to call this still a speed painting. And we're directly heading over to base coating all the metal parts with Vallejo Gunmetal Grey from the Vallejo airbrush series. And all you need to base coat is basically the backpack stuff, the chest eagle and the weapon itself, and of course the metal parts on the helmet. And this is the part where I want to thank everyone that supported me on the journey creating miniature painting content so far. Thanks to you. Since last week, I'm now a YouTube partner and be able to provide you a channel membership. Check it out if you're interested. There are several benefits. The only thing I don't want it to do is special channel member videos, because I think my videos should be available for everyone. And next we're heading over to use some Abaddon Black in our 1:2 mix, so 1 part Abaddon Black, 2 parts water. And what we're gonna do, we're base coating the weapon casing and the subsuit of the power armor. And one thing I cannot mention enough is, guys, if the painting feels uncomfortable, simply change the angle of the mini. I've seen this so many times now that people are just holding the mini in a static position and turning the head around or doing strange brush strokes instead of changing the angle of the mini to get a comfortable way to paint. Next, we're heading over to a 1:2 mix of Basalt Grey of Vallejo and Water. And what we're gonna do, we're creating volumetric highlights on the gun casing and highlighting the subsuit with a couple of edge highlights on the subsuit raised areas. And on the volumetric highlights, you should try to do a couple of messy brush strokes to keep some kind of a used look to the weapon casing. And don't worry about some messy looks, especially on the volumetric highlights. The overall wash will fix this for us. With neutral gray of Vallejo mixed with 2 parts water and 1 part paint, we're then starting to create a couple of edge highlights on the raised areas, also on the subsuit and the weapon casing. And on the weapon casing, we're also adding a couple of more volumetric highlights on the more lighted areas. And we're still doing this in a rough pattern just to keep the used look and the overall wash will anyways later on create a really smooth transition between the different layers of grey we're using to highlight the subsuit and the weapon casing. And now we're finishing the black parts, so the subsuit and the weapon casing, by adding a couple of light reflection highlights on the upper edges. I used here Vallejo pale grey blue, also mixed with 2 parts water, and I used this color because of its high contrast. And one thing that's really important about the Eavy Metal style, it lives from sharp edges and high contrast colors all over the mini. And then we're heading over to a quick base coat with rich gold and airbrush thinner. So the mixture here is 1 part rich gold, 1 part airbrush thinner, and we're base coating the ornament and the charges of the bolter. And as you can see, this color is flowing super nice because of the airbrush thinner and still covering really well. And this is why I usually thin my metallic colors down with airbrush thinner. And in this stage we're using Pro Acryl Silver to highlight all the metal parts. Pro Acryl Silver has a real high contrast compared to the gold and the Gunmetal Grey of Vallejo. This is also something we want to achieve to create this Eavy Metal look, and this is one of the parts where I can just tell you again, always trust the process. In speed paintings, you will see that the overall wash that we put on will get every part some kind of depth and brings all the high contrast colors in a real nice balance together. And of course also increases the contrast a little bit more. Thank you for watching this video so far. If you like this kind of videos, I would be really proud if you simply hit the like button, share this or some of my other videos, or even subscribe to my channel. With a mix of 1 part Pro Acryl burnt red and 1 part water, we're then starting to base coat the Crimson Fists, which somehow sounds like a tongue twister, so always don't forget to paint your Crimson Fists with burnt red and water. And to highlight this iconic Crimson Fist, we're using a 1-to-1 mix of Mephiston red and water and create a couple of thick edge highlights around the Crimson Fists. And then we're also adding a couple of small volumetric highlights to all of the fingers. And we're finishing this Crimson Fist with Eversun Scarlet mixed with 1 part water, and we're simply just adding some upper reflection highlights to the fingers and the Crimson Fists itself. And now it's time to create the overall magic mix, and we're doing this by mixing up 1 part Black Legion contrast, 4 parts contrast medium and 1 part water to get a little bit more flow into the mix. And we're doing this because of 2 reasons. One reason is we want to tone the armor a little bit more down into the Crimson Fists base color itself, which is basically a real dark blue. And the second thing is we can also shade this armor within the same step, increase the amount of contrast to the mini. So here's the one trade-off with an overall contrast wash compared to an oil wash. If you shade an armor panel and your color isn't fully dry and you go over this panel again, you will create some kind of streaks. So what's important, if you apply an overall contrast wash, try to shade every armor panel in one go, use a big brush, and if you can't finish it in one go, wait until everything is dry. With a 1-to-1 mix of Caledor Sky and Water, we're then starting to create edge highlights all around the armor. And just to give you a little bit of a timeline here, as I applied the overall contrast wash, it took me around 1 hour and 15 minutes to paint this mini so far. And I spent on this edge highlighting stage with Caledor Sky round about 30 minutes. And just because this is such an important part to create this Eavy Metal look, just take your time and try to create as smooth edge highlights as you can. Don't make yourself haste. We will anyways just add another layer of color and then the armor is finished. And this is, by the way, one of the things that surprised me the most. As I started with this idea in my mind a couple of months ago, creating Eavy Metal style color schemes in speed painting patterns, I thought, okay, a guide like this will take around 3 to 4 hours of painting for the mini itself, as complexer color schemes I did in the past. So I was super heavily surprised as I ended up with 2.5 hours, including basing and painting the eyes. So if you like this kind of painting patterns and style, I will definitely do a lot more of these guides, because I really love the Eavy Metal style itself, and I would really love to provide you a couple of more of this Eavy Metal stylish guides. And now we're finishing up the armor by adding a couple of reflection highlights with Vallejo Azure. We're using this color also in a 1-to-1 mix, so 1 part water and 1 part color. And what we're gonna do now is we're creating a couple of smaller edge highlights than we did with the Caledor Sky. And we're simply focusing here on the edges that would mostly reflect the light and put the attention of the viewer onto the face and the bolter. So we basically paint the right arm, the shoulder pads, the face itself, and the upper edges of the knee pads, and that's basically it. I spent here around 10 to 15 minutes until I was finished. This just increases the contrast a little bit more and just intenses the feeling of the Eavy Metal style. And something we usually do before the overall wash, but not in this case because we want a clean finish, is we're preparing the surface to apply a decal with Microsol. Then we're applying the decal to the surface, and as the Microsol softens the decal, we're shaping it into the form of the shoulder pad. And then we're covering the surfaces with a full coat of Vallejo Premium Gloss Varnish just to integrate the decal a little bit more into the armor. With Burnt Red of Pro Acryl, we're then starting to paint the eye lenses. For this Eavy Metal style, we're painting, of course, reflecting eye lenses. And keep in mind that you keep a small shadow around the eye lens just to enhance the feeling of the reflection and the depth a little bit more. And to directly increase the contrast and the reflection feeling a little bit more, we're heading over to Evil Sun Scarlet and painting this Evil Sun Scarlet in 2/3 in the front of the lens. To To increase the contrast even more, we're then using pure Fire Dragon Bright to paint in 1/3 of the front part of the lens. To finish up the lenses, we're using bold titanium white of Pro Acryl and adding the iconic reflection highlight in the upper left and the upper right of the lenses. And for such a cleanish looking mini, I decided to switch my basing concept a little bit, so I used a Necromunda base, primed it black, and applied Pro Acryl dark silver with a dry brush in circular motions. In this case, I used the Artis Opus Series D size medium brush. And to finish the base, we're using Pro Acryl silver and adding a couple of dry brush strokes from the direction of the light source just to create a couple of reflection highlights. Then we simply glue the mini onto the base and apply a full coat of Vallejo Premium Satin Varnish, and here we go with the finished Eavy Metal style looking speed painting mini. I hope you had some fun, and I hope to see you soon.